incredible confidence. How to find your identity in kind of a confusing world that tries to push you into any other identity but your own, and how to gain a sense of confidence about that and lose the insecurities that keep you from getting what you want out of life. And also how to gain a sense of clarity about what you want in life so that you can get it. So, let me tell you my story. When I was a kid, I was raised in a kind of basically a Pentecostal family outside a small town in Idaho. I was homeschooled until I was 14, and so that really just meant that I spent a lot of time by myself. I had 4 sisters and no brothers, so I didn't really have anyone to hang out with. I spent a lot of time out in the fields, wandering around, looking under rocks, playing with bugs, and just generally being a kid, but never interacting with any other kids. And in fact, when we would go to church, as we did, because like I said, we were basically Pentecostal. It was called non-denominational, but basically Pentecostal. When I would go to church, I didn't really get along with the kids that went there because all of them went to the private school that was run at that church. And so I was kind of the outsider, and I didn't really fit in with them. And so even when I did hang out with other kids, I was kind of the weird one. And when I was about 10 years old, my little sister was born. And that meant that I suddenly became kind of the middle child. Now, there's different stereotypes about what it means to be a middle child, but what it meant for me was that suddenly not only was I the weird kid at church, but I was kind of the forgotten one in my own family. I had grown up being the baby of the family, and then all of a sudden I was just kind of one of the kids, and that was really strange for me as a 10-year-old kid to suddenly go from being the favorite, the youngest, the only boy in the family, to now I'm just one of the kids, and everything that I had grown up seeing as unique to me, I sort of felt like it was transferred to this new baby of the family. So that meant that I spent even more time out by myself in the fields, wandering around, and just kind of forming my own identity that was separate from any social group. So I didn't know how to be myself around other people. I didn't know what that meant to be a social person. And so later on, that ended up causing me a lot of problems. Like I said, when I was 14, I started going to the school that was run by that church. And, I was the weird one. I was this new kid that didn't really fit in. And people would say things, when we'd be out playing during recess. Kids would say things like, "You're so weird, Andrew." And I don't think they meant anything by it, but I really was weird, and I took it to heart. I sort of felt like this weird person. I learned in a social situation, I was the weird one, and that's how I learned to form my social identity, was around this construct of being weird. And so as I got older and grew into being an adult, I kind of stuck with that being weird. I didn't ever grow out of it. And in fact, our school was really small, so all the social groups that existed, there weren't really groups, but the social dynamics that existed within that school stayed the same throughout my entire teens. And there wasn't really any way to change that. If I wanted to make a different friend, I really couldn't, because there wasn't anyone else to be friends with. There was just a few people, and I never learned to date. There wasn't anybody to date. I mean, there were a few girls, but it was a Pentecostal church, and that was kind of just a taboo thing to think about dating. And so anyway, when I finally got to be 18, when I graduated school, I went off to Florida to a job working for my uncle. And I just needed to kind of separate myself from that world, and I was a lot more comfortable being by myself and not being around other people, because when I was around other people, I just felt weird. And so I went off to Florida, and I started working this job, and I didn't make any friends there because I didn't know how to do that. And so I would just work every day and then go home and hang out by myself, or go to the mall and wander around, or go down to the beach and hang out by myself. And one time when I was at the mall, which is really like the only other place where I might have run into anyone else, this guy walked up to me and asked me some question. I can't remember what he wanted to know, like what time it was or something. And I started talking to him for a little bit, and he ended up giving me his phone number. And I didn't really think much of it, but later on, I think probably a month later or something, I was bored at home one day, and I decided to call this guy up. And I go hang out with him. Well, meanwhile, we decide to go to Miami. We drive down to Miami in my pickup truck, and he tells me that he's gay and he's attracted to me. This is such a foreign concept to me. I grew up in a Pentecostal church, out in Idaho, in a small town. I don't know what it means to be gay. I don't know what it means to even be attracted to somebody, really. I mean, I understand the concept, but I wouldn't know the first thing of how to handle that. So I didn't. So I hung out with him that night, and we ended up going back to his house, and he starts coming on to me, and I didn't know what to do. And I didn't really stop him. And so we end up in his bed, and he's kissing me, and I'm confused about it. I mean, I'm just like this naive kid that has no idea what any of this means, or what to do, or how to tell somebody that I don't want to do that, or anything. And so I wouldn't say that this is a traumatizing experience for me, because it was so foreign. It was something that I just didn't really... It was like I had gone to another planet, and I was interacting with aliens. Here, this is one of the first people that I've ever talked to that wasn't part of my little world back in Idaho. Other than the people that I worked with at my job, he was really the only person that I ever really talked to. I mean, I talked to people at a fast food restaurant or Starbucks or something, but he's the first person that I had a conversation with outside of my work and the people that I knew from back home. So it was like I didn't really know what was happening. And anyway, after that, I ended up coming back to Idaho, and I'm kind of interacting with my small group of friends again, and I'm sort of thinking about what had happened. And it was weird for me, because I knew, like I said, I wasn't gay, but the only even close to sexual encounter that I'd ever had was with a man, and I didn't know what to make of it. I'd always been attracted to girls, but I didn't know how to talk to them. I didn't really have any to talk to at my school. Here I am, 19 years old, and I've never been on a date with a girl. I've never talked to girls that are outside of my small group of friends. I don't know the first thing about how to interact with girls, or how to be, my only friendship outside of my little group of friends here in Idaho was that weird encounter that I had back in Florida. So I didn't even know how to interact with guys. I didn't know how to have a normal friendship or a normal dating relationship. So I felt like so lost. And what I kind of realized back at that point in time was that there was gonna have to be a lot of growth for me. I knew that there was a place where I wanted to be, and I wasn't there. I knew that it was going to take a lot of work to get from this confused, insecure, kind of identityless person and get to where I felt like a confident person out in the social realm. And so something that happened during this time, I was in Barnes & Noble one time, and I came across this book called The Game. And it kind of stood out to me because it looked like a Bible, which I was really familiar with, but it wasn't a Bible. And I picked it up and looked at it. It said The Game, and I was like, what is this book? I opened it and started reading. And The Game is written by Neil Strauss, and it's about the pickup artist community. And I was fascinated. I mean, here was this group of insecure guys who got together and learned how to become confident social people so that they could go out and start relationships with girls, go out and find girlfriends. And it was all about this community of guys that they all started out insecure and not knowing who they were, and they all became confident and were dating these models and actresses, and it sounded so mind-blowing to me to realize that you could be an insecure person and change it. And so I had to find out more. I researched one of the guys in the book, David D'Angelo, which actually happens to be a kind of a made-up name. Most of, if not all of the pickup artist community guys, they all have made-up names. Originally, that was because they needed to kind of hide their identities because they were going online and talking about these interactions that they were having, and they didn't want, any of the girls to accidentally find out about them because they were posting these kind of intimate details, and they didn't want to expose themselves or the girls that they were talking about. Well, David D'Angelo wrote a book called Double Your Dating, and I found a PDF of it online, and I printed it off and I read it, and this book changed my life. It was completely freeing because, he's got this concept called cocky funny, and most of the stuff that he talks about is based on this concept of being cocky and funny. And I started trying out the stuff that he says in this book about being cocky and funny, and I started talking to girls, and I started making little jokes here and there, and kind of sort of like pretending to be confident, but it was working. And so it was like, I have a way out. I don't have to be stuck feeling insecure. I mean, it kind of gave me a glimmer of hope, I guess. And it didn't really feel authentic. And I had a hard time kind of justifying the things that I was saying to girls because it didn't really feel like it was coming from me. And I knew that there was something missing in that, but it was a start. So I started there, and then I gradually found out more and more about this pickup artist world, and I found videos on YouTube, and I read other books, and I subscribed to these email newsletters from like David D'Angelo and others like him. And I just started kind of putting this stuff into my brain, changing the way that I thought about social identity and who I was. And rather than just being kind of the weird one, I started thinking about the possibility of being more than that, being different than that, being, actually being a normal person. And at the same time, one of my friends was going to college, and I would hang out with him a lot. And he was kind of the social opposite of me, really charismatic and cool, and all the girls liked him, and he didn't care what anybody thought of him. And he's always cracking jokes. He was the perfect example of cocky funny. And so I started kind of like, in my mind, competing with him a little bit. So, I would be trying to act more like him and try to not seem like the weird one. So I was putting more and more effort into all of this and getting better and better at it. But like I said, during that time, it didn't really feel authentic, and I knew something was missing. So I want to fast forward a few years and go to a few years ago, like a couple years ago, when I was dating this girl. So, over this time, over the course of, 8 years or so, I'd been practicing all this stuff, and I'd been dating a few people, and I was getting to where I felt better in my own skin, but I still didn't feel 100% authentic. I still was kind of trying too hard, I guess. So anyway, fast forward to a few years ago, and I'm dating this girl, and she's gorgeous, and she's just the coolest person, and I'm in love. But here comes the but. But she wants to move out of state and go to a different school. At the time, we were both attending the school here in Idaho, Boise State University, and she wanted to move away, and I wasn't done with school yet, so it would be dumb of me to move away unless I was to transfer to the same school, and I didn't want to do that. So I didn't transfer, but I couldn't deal with the idea of her leaving. And so I left everything, picked up and moved with her out of state. And I was miserable for months. I was living over there and getting odd jobs and just hated it. And coming up was my 30th birthday. And I was suddenly super aware of how I was not chasing my dreams. I was not doing what I wanted to be doing. I was chasing this girl instead. And I knew I shouldn't be doing that, but I just couldn't deal with the idea of letting that go. Over all this time, I've been learning how to basically make people like me, but I was never learning how to be a confident person. I was learning little pieces of confidence here and there. It was cool to be able to attract a girl like this and keep her interested in me, but the entire time it was kind of like a job, and I was having to sacrifice things that I wanted to make this relationship work. And part of me knew that I needed to let that go, but I wasn't ready to. I still needed that validation that I was getting from having that relationship. And that's kind of why I want to do this podcast. I know how hard it can be to let go of the insecurities and let go of what other people think of you and go out there and do what it is that you dream of doing. I know how hard that is. And it's not all about insecurity, but that's a big part of it. A big part of figuring out what you want in life comes down to letting go of what other people think of you so that you can focus on it. Because it takes time and confidence to be able to focus on what it is that you want to do and figure it out and get there. And if you're spending that time trying to get other people to like you, or if you're afraid of going out and taking steps to get where you want to be because somebody might think you're stupid, or somebody might think that your ideas are stupid, well, that's stopping you from accomplishing your dreams. And I've been there. I've been there for a long time. I was there. And I know how much you can want something but not go for it because you're too caught up in the relationship that you're in, or what your family thinks of you, or what your friends think of you, or what society thinks of you. It can be so difficult to break those chains and go out on your own and start making choices that might make you look like an idiot, to your friends, or to the person that you're dating, or your husband or wife, or your family. I know what that's like, and that's where I was a year ago. And what ended up happening was I came back to Idaho. I had enough. I couldn't do it anymore. I knew that I had to go back to Idaho. So I came back to Idaho to start going to school again. And the girl came back just to spend the summer with me and with her friends and family. And she ended up breaking up with me a week after getting here. And she ended up, a week after that, moving on to one of my best friends. She started dating him. And I was devastated. Here was this girl that I was giving up everything that I knew that I wanted with my life. I was giving up everything to try to make this relationship work. And she moved on in a week to somebody else. Here I was putting so much effort into getting validation out of this relationship, all the validation that I could have given myself in chasing my dreams and being who I wanted to be, and going after what I wanted, all that validation that I was kind of sacrificing so that I could get it from this girl, and so quickly she just made it meaningless. And I was suddenly struck with how little I felt that I was worth anything. How worthless I felt. How lost I felt. Putting all this energy into a relationship that suddenly became meaningless. In fact, a couple relationships, because one, my girlfriend, and then also one of my best friends, I felt betrayed by both of them. Here they were, they both knew that I wanted to be dating this girl, and neither one of them cared about it. So here I was putting all this effort into trying to make these relationships mean something, and suddenly realizing that they didn't mean anything. And like I said, I was devastated. I spent months crying to myself about just that harsh realization about, here I'd spent 10 years trying to learn how to make the perfect relationship work, and learning how to attract a girl, and learning how to keep a girl, learning how to seem like a confident guy, so that I could kind of keep this social identity sort of spinning. I have this metaphor in my mind of those clowns in a circus spinning the plates on balancing them, and that's how my social identity was. I was just keeping it going, but I was not spending that energy that I should have been spending on the things that I actually wanted to be doing. And it was so hard to realize that. And I felt like such a worthless person, such a failure, believing that I could have made this relationship work, but I just wasn't good enough, or I wasn't trying hard enough. And my initial reaction was to try even harder, and I kept talking to the girl and trying to, kind of make a deal with her, like, if you'll come back to me, then I'll forgive you. And that was just, it was so symbolic about how far away I was from where I wanted to be. Here I was devastated, and yet still trying to give more so that I could prove myself to be good enough for this relationship. And what I should have been doing, what I should have done way before that, is to let go of what she thought of me, let go of the relationship, let go of this social identity that I'd been trying to keep up for so long, and just be myself. Just go out there and be who I wanted to be, do what I wanted to do. And it took her breaking up with me and moving on to my best friend. It took all of that for me to suddenly, finally realize what I was doing to myself. And over the past year, I've been spending time learning what it means to honor myself and stop trying to keep up this this social identity and put energy into my own personal values and what I care about. I've been spending time working on projects that I'm interested in, and working on my education, and looking into getting a job that I want to have, not one that looks cool, or not one that my friends will think that I'm cool for having. And it's been a struggle, because I spent so much time learning how to basically please people that I don't really know anything else. But I'm finally at a place, after a year of kind of recovering from that last relationship, and a year of thinking about all the things that I've learned over the past 10 years, and where I started when I was a kid. And I've learned so much that when I look back over the videos that I used to watch about learning how to be a confident guy, or the material that I read about chasing your dreams, and when I look at that stuff, I see something that's missing. And I want to offer what's missing. I want to be the fill in the gap. So if you've been looking at other material, or listening to other podcasts, or watching other videos, and something's missing, I hope that you'll pay attention to this podcast, because this is just the first episode, and I'm just introducing myself and my story and where I came from. But in the future, I want to have interviews, and I want to bring up some of the material that I've found helpful over the years, but build on it and kind of show the piece that's missing from all that other material and all the other motivational speakers out there. And I want to have something that's valuable here, so that you don't have to spend the 10 years that I spent wasting your time. I mean, I won't say that all that time was wasted, but I really could have been where I'm at now a long time ago. And where I'm at now is, I'm so much happier than I've ever been. So I feel so much more complete, and I have a sense of real, actual confidence that I don't have to pretend I have. And I have such a clarity about what I want and how the steps that I'm going to take to get where I want to be. And I know what it's like to not have that. I know what it's like to not have that and want it for so long. And I can share with you how to get here without taking all that extra time, and I'm glad that I did, because for me, that's what I needed in order to get here. But I'm also glad that you're listening to this podcast right now, because that means that you aren't in the same place that I was. You're not going to have to spend all that time. I mean, for me, it was necessary. I needed to take all that time, because I'd grown up in an environment that was so opposite of normal life that it took all that learning to get here. But probably you didn't grow up in a Pentecostal church, out in a tiny little town and homeschooled. Probably you didn't grow up like that. And even if you did, I can save you a lot of time. The next episodes are going to be covering a lot of ground really quickly. I'm going to focus on one topic each episode, And each one is going to hopefully, and I feel like, going to be groundbreaking. Going to be stuff that you won't encounter anywhere else. It's going to totally shift your mindset from where you are now to incredible confidence. So thank you for listening. I'm excited for these next episodes. I don't know how far this is going to go. I don't know, hopefully I'll be doing this for a few years or longer. I really want to be offering all the stuff that I've learned. I want to be offering that to the world, and I don't know how long it's going to take to get this material out there. Like I said, I'm going to cover a lot of ground quickly. So, maybe this will just be 10 episodes, but I'm excited to get this material out there. I think it's going to change lives. I really do. I hope that my story kind of inspires you or intrigues you at least to hear what I've got to say. That's kind of been the point of this episode, is just to put out my story so that you're kind of like, I wonder what it is that this guy's got to say. I mean, it sounds like he's been through a lot, and I have. I have been through a lot. I've been homeless, and I've hitchhiked around the U.S., and I started out this naive Pentecostal kid, and I met Buddhists and Hindus and Jewish people and Muslims, and I've covered so much ground about my theology and my philosophy and social rules, and I learned things about evolutionary psychology and the biological origins of why humans act the way we do. And I studied all this stuff for years, and I want to put it together into a package that you can take and learn something from and grow exponentially, so that you don't have to spend all that time that I spent sifting through so much stuff, and a lot of it pointless. I learned little bits here and there from all the material that I studied, and all of it I felt like something was missing. It was this understanding that it's not about the map that you give somebody, but it's about the compass that you give them. If you give somebody a map, it's assuming that they started where you started and want to get where you're going. I don't want to do that. I want to give everybody a compass. I want to say, look, here's north, here's south, here's east, and here's west. And you can take a map and get anywhere you want to go. But don't think for a second that you got to end up where I am. Don't think for a second that you should have started where I started. You can go wherever you want to go in life. And I want to teach you how to get there. I want to teach you the tools that I've learned that I'm now putting into practice finally, after years of learning them and stacking up all these lessons. I've finally gotten to where I have a complete compass. And there's maps out there, but none of them are perfect for you. Each person is unique, and we're each going down a unique path. We're each going to end up in a different place. And I think it's so important that we keep that in focus. So much of the material out there assumes so much about who you are and where you're going. And we can't do that. Not only is it insulting to each of us, but it's misleading, because you're going to take a different path than anyone else. You're going to go a different direction than anyone else. And what you really need are a set of skills to get there. You don't need 10 steps, because those 10 steps are not going to lead you where you want to go. Those 10 steps are assuming that you started somewhere else and assuming that you're going to a different place than where you're going. You don't need 10 steps. You need a set of skills that you can take and help yourself get where you want to go, wherever that is.